If you are in the stream, could you please just give me a message in the chat just so I know everything is going okay? And when that happens, I will get started. How's it going, guys? Can you hear me okay? Is everything working? All set. Perfect. Thank you, Speederman. So welcome to another live stream. Thank you for your support on the first one. I think it all went pretty well, overall. As I said, it won't be perfect. There was still a lot of things to improve on, and hopefully this one runs a bit smoother. So I hope you're well. Thank you all for taking the time out of your day to watch this live or as a video if you're watching it later. Champions League was obviously hectic midweek, lots of games covered, but our attention turns back to Premier League in this video. Um, and I've got 5 games to cover. I think there are some really nice fixtures, some good matchups. So feel free to send your bets in the chat if you want, and I'll go through them. So without wasting any more time, the first game to cover is Newcastle against Fulham, which is a 3 o'clock kickoff at Craven Cottage. Fulham currently sit mid-table with 1 win, 1 loss, and 2 back-to-back 1-1 draws as their most recent results. They seem to be pretty okay since losing Palhinha. I think his sort of absence has been a bit overstated. On the side of Newcastle, it's been a stronger start. They're undefeated, 3 wins, 1 draw, and they most recently completed a really nice comeback at Molineux. Um, Conceding first from a counter attack, they then went on to win the game 2-1 despite Alexander Isak going off at half time. Looking into the injury report, for Fulham, they have actually no injuries to contend with, which was obviously a positive for them. But for Newcastle, it's a bit more complicated. They've got 7 players listed as potentially missing out on this game. Alexander Isak is currently not on the injury list. However, he was substituted at halftime against Wolves when the ball sort of scraped his eye. It was a pretty freak injury. He was seen with an eye patch in training. So I think it's a 50-50 whether he starts this game. With that in mind, the first angle that I've got for you guys is for Fulham to have over 13.5 shots in combination with over 4.5 corners, which comes out at even money with 365. I think there's 2 trends that we sort of established last season. Um, it's that Fulham are a lot better at home. They perform a lot better on average, and Newcastle perform a lot poorly when they're on the road. That's sort of reflected in their shot counts. So Newcastle conceded 15.8 shots away in the league compared to just 12.3 at home. Whereas Fulham, although their discrepancy isn't as big home and away, we did see a pretty noticeable uptick in shots when they do play at home towards the end of the season in particular. So if we look into the player stats graph, we can see so far this season they've cleared 21 shots against West Ham and 18 against Leicester. Obviously just a 1 shot against Man City, but that is a very tough matchup, arguably the toughest matchup in the league, 4 shots. So they can kind of be excused from that. If we exclude that bit of data, we can see they're comfortably hitting 10 plus shots in every game, which is obviously a really, really positive sign. Um, I really like the sort of addition of corners here. Obviously, it's a correlated stat with the way Fulham play. They utilize their width a lot. They cross into the box a lot, looking to find Raul Jimenez or Muniz, whoever starts here. So corners is naturally a good sort of place to start when you want to correlate something with shots. If we look into the head-to-head data between Fulham and Newcastle last season, luckily we actually have an EFL Cup game, so provide us with a bit more information. Fulham actually had 14 shots exactly in both games at Craven Cottage. But so what stands out is Fulham actually had 14 corners in the league fixture and 10 corners in the cup. Obviously, it's worth noting that Newcastle won both of those games, so it was 1-0 in the league and 2-0 in the EFL in the FA Cup. So it's worth noting that there was a positive game state for Fulham to have shots, which is something to take into account. But I think having such high corner counts is something that definitely sort of grabs the attention. And I really like that they hit this line twice last season against Newcastle. So that's the first angle for me. Sticking on a similar train of thought, I wrote about Adama Traore and his sort of new role in this Fulham side under Marco Silva. And sort of what's happening is with Kenny Tete starting at right back, he has sort of a willingness to get forward and maintain width. And in doing so, that sort of allows Adama Traore to sort of invert, play a bit more centrally, a lot more closer to goal, as opposed to how we've seen him play for Wolves, which is he's sort of stuck out wide, he's forced to just go down the line and cross the ball in again and again and again. But he's a bit more unpredictable at Fulham, playing in an inside role, he can sort of come inside, he can go out wide. He has the width from Tete, so he doesn't need to worry about staying too wide or out the touchline, which obviously makes him naturally a better target for shots if he's going to be closer towards goal. And I think that has been reflected in his shot numbers. We've seen an overall increase. He's had at least one shot on target in 3 out of 4 games so far. I think the most sort of key thing for me though is his uptick in minutes under Marco Silva. So we've very rarely seen Adama Traore play the full 90 minutes in a game. I think he sort of received his criticism for lacking a sort of end product. So he's flashy to watch, entertaining to watch, but that doesn't really translate into goals. Or that's been the case for the last few seasons, at least when he was at Wolves. However, now he seems a lot more sort of in his element under Marco Silva. He can sort of the system seems to cater to his strengths a lot more, and therefore he's been involved in the goals a lot more. So it's been 4 games so far this season. He's already registered his first goal. He scored against Ipswich, and he also got an assist against Leicester. So he is sort of proving the doubters wrong in terms of those sort of end product criticisms. If we look into his shot data so far, he had 3 shots against Man United, 3 shots against Leicester, 1 shot against Ipswich, and then 4 shots against West Ham, with a shot on target in 3 of those 4 games. Angle two for me is Adama to have a shot on target, which is currently 1.95 with Unibet or BetMGM. Understandably, not many people will sort of have access to those bookmakers, at least an unrestricted account. So the next best price you can find is 1.87 with SpreadX, which I also think is really, really good value, given how sort of tactically Fulham have changed and given the data so far. You could also pair that with Adama to have 2 shots, so with 2 shots, one on target, which is done in 2 out of 4, but it's gone very close in the other two. And that comes out as odds against, which I think is a fantastic bet. Um, in addition, we also see sort of Anthony Robinson contribute a lot to attacks for Fulham down the left flank, and he sort of favours maintaining width and crossing the ball in. In doing that, we've seen sort of Adama Traore arrive at the back post or get into the box a bit more to be on the end of those crosses if Muniz or Jimenez can't be. So that's how we scored against Ipswich. He sort of got on the end of a Robinson cross. So if he can play the full 90, which he hasn't in the last 2 games, I really, really like his shot on target prices. And that will be my angle two for this game. As a sort of lean, could go for Adama to score or assist. Additionally, I think the matchup against Newcastle is really positive. Um, I think Newcastle have sort of displayed a sort of a vulnerability on the break, which we saw against Wolves. Obviously, Wolves' only goal came from a counter-attacking situation. And just generally, Newcastle did struggle to defend on the break. In the second half, they were a lot better, but that was more because Wolves sort of looked to defend their league and sort of they lost that attacking impotence. We saw whenever they sort of had the opportunity to get forward, they would sort of slow attacks down rather than really go for the jugular, which cost them in the end, I would say. But Adama Traore had that sort of breakneck speed on the break to really cause problems, and I fancy him to to do that in this game, especially if he can play the full 90, as I said. Next thing is the next angle is for Newcastle to draw some fouls. So interestingly, Newcastle are actually the most foul team in the league so far, and the main contributor for that record is Bruno Guimaraes, who's actually drawn at least 3 fouls in every game so far. In total, he's drawn 19 fouls in 4 games, which is pretty ridiculous numbers. That's almost 5 fouls drawn per game so far in the league. And he's set to match up against Sasha Lukic and Andres Pereira, who are the defensive midfield duo for Fulham. Um, if we look into the sort of defensive numbers for those two, we can see that Sasha Lukic has sort of emulated the role of Palhinha in this team. Obviously, not to the same effect. It's quite difficult to sort of replicate the impact that Palhinha had. But his foul counts have been something to note. He's already made 9 fouls in 4 league games, with at least 3 fouls in 3 of those games. So he blanked in the first game against Man United, and since then has made 3 fouls in every game. So considering he'll now be up against the most fouled team in the league so far, logically it makes sense to look into his foul prices. And with Sky, I believe he's the best price at 1.8 to make 2 fouls. Um, if you want to sort of double that with something, my idea would be to go Lukic 2 fouls, Bruno Guimaraes 2 fouls drawn, which comes out at 2.2, which is really nice odds against correlate stats again, just to boost the price up. Looking into his partner, uh, Andres Pereira, who's sort of played in the deeper role to facilitate record signing Emil Smith Rowe. Uh, in dropping deeper, he's seen an uptick in fouls, so he's made 4 fouls in 4 games, 2 fouls against Man United, 2 fouls against West Ham, compared to last season where his fouls average was 0.59 per game. So we've seen a big uptick since that move, which obviously makes sense if he's involved in more duels. Um, he is priced at 1.66 with Paddy Power to commit a single foul, which looks a really, really nice price. Looks very good value, considering he's priced at 1.4 with Sky and 1.44 with William Hill. 2 fouls here, I think, is just over 2 to 1. And again, considering the matchup, I think you'll find duels with the likes of Bruno Guimaraes, Joe Linton, who's good for drawing fouls, and potentially Sandro Tonali if he starts. I think Longstaff is obviously not as good for drawing fouls, but he was substituted at half time for Tonali against Wolves. So I think you can make a case for Tonali starting this game. I think he's been in good form since he's returned from his sort of absence. He's looked good on the international stage as well. He'll definitely be knocking on the door for a start, his first start of the league this season. And if he does so, I really, really like Andres Pereira to make 1 foul at 1.66. Potentially doubled with something, haven't decided with that yet. Um, Fourth and final angle for this game is dependent on lineup. So as I said, Alexander Isak is not on the injury list, but I would say it's a 50-50 whether he starts. Assuming he doesn't start, when we saw no Callum Wilson and no Isak last season, it was Anthony Gordon who played the central striker and he was on penalties. Um, so straight away I'm drawn to his sort of goal scorer prices. He's best priced with Unibet, which we'll ignore again. Next best is 365. We've got him at 3.6 to be an anytime goal scorer, which looks really good. If he is to start as a central striker, decent matchup against Fulham, not great matchup, but good enough matchup. He'll be on pens as well. And he's 8.5 for first goal scorer, which again looks really nice. If he is going to play striker, he probably won't play the full 90, which makes his first goal scorer price better value than any goal scorer, anytime goal scorer price. Um, Welcome if you are joining late. We haven't missed too much. We've just done the first game. So just to recap for you that joined late, the first bet is Fulham to have over 13.5 shots combined with over 4.5 corners. Next is Adama to have a shot on target at 1.95. Potentially a score or assist as a lean, which is priced at 2.75 with Bet365 and Sky. Angle 3 is Sasha Lukic to make over 1.5 fouls and Bruno Guimaraes to draw of 1.5 fouls, which is odds against with Sky 2.2. Potentially Andreas Pereira to make one foul as a lean in there as well. And finally, what we've just gone over is Anthony Gordon, anytime goal scorer and first goal scorer, but only if Isak does not start. So I imagine that price will shorten if Isak is left out and Gordon starts as a striker. So what you could do is back it now and then wait for lineups and then potentially cash out, or alternatively just wait for lineups. Next game is another 3 o'clock kickoff. It's Tottenham against Brentford at the London Stadium. 3 o'clock kickoff, so we don't get full markets again. It's been a tough start to the season for Spurs. They've just got the one win. They were most recently defeated in the North London derby in what was a pretty damning defeat, I would say. I think it would leave a sort of sour taste in the mouth, a very frustrating loss for them. Um, so they won't come into this game full of confidence. Brentford also lost their most recent game in the league 2-1 to Man City. I would say they've had a positive start to the season overall. They've got 2 wins and 2 losses. The 2 losses being against Liverpool at Anfield and Man City at the Etihad, which they can be sort of forgiven for. Um, on the injury report list, Wilson Odobert was substituted in the last game for Spurs, so he will miss out here. Solanke is expected to lead the line. No Richarlison. And Basuma was also a doubt. Uh, if Basuma obviously is to miss out, most likely we just see Bentancur slot into the defensive midfield role. For Brentford, it's a lot more complicated. They are looking very, very light up front. They've obviously lost Wissa in the last game um, to an ankle injury against Man City, which is not ideal at all, considering obviously Ivan Toney has left over the summer and Igor Thiago is also out. So it sort of begs the question who is in line to start alongside Brentford. It could be Lewis Potter, could even be Fabio Carvalho, who scored in the EFL Cup and looks in pretty good nick. I think most likely though it will be Kevin Schade. He replaced Wissa at the break. So I think he's most likely to play here. Angle one for me is taking advantage of a sort of matchup that marries up quite nicely, and that is that Tottenham have struggled from set pieces and they also tend to concede a lot. If we exclude Romero, Tottenham just generally have a very small team in terms of they don't really have that physicality to defend set pieces, and I think it's no wonder that Arteta looked to sort of take advantage of that. I think Brentford will try and do the same thing, and we've seen them try and do it so far. They are reliant on set pieces, especially without sort of key attacking players. They might look to lean on their sort of set pieces ability to sort of create their shooting chances and create their goals. So far this season, Nathan Collins has actually been a massive target for them from set pieces, and he's had a shot in every game. As I said, it's been a tough sort of run of fixtures for Brentford so far, but it is it is quite it fills me with confidence seeing that he's had a shot even in tough matchups. So he had a shot against Liverpool at Anfield and a shot against Man City at the Etihad. Um, 2 shots against Liverpool actually, and he's had a shot on target in both of those games as well. So three out of 4 games he's had a shot on target. 1 out of 4 he's had 2 shots, and for a centre back, those are pretty decent shot numbers. If you consider he'll be a target from corners, set pieces, and even throw-ins. Obviously Brentford take the long throw-in. So to see his price at just short of 2-1 with Unibet and BetMGM for a single shot looks a massive, massive price. Just for the sake of most people not having that sort of account, I think we'll stick with Bet365 here. They've got both. They've got Collins priced at odds against. He is 2.25. The last time I checked, we'll just double check. That's the same. But it's a sort of long shot prices that are the target here. Obviously, backing centre backs to have shots isn't an ideal strategy over the course of the season. I think their distance from goal is just not ideal, and you're sort of relying on a very specific situation for them to have a shot. But in this scenario, I think it's sort of the target has to be long shots. So Nathan Collins is 2.25 with Bet365 to have a shot. Also Pinnock at 2.37. I'm sure that's shortened quite a bit, but if we look into the shot on target prices, we've got Nathan Collins is 5-1 to have a shot on target, considering that's landed in 3 out of 4 games so far, including at Anfield, including at the Etihad. That looks a massive price. Spurs are obviously the best matchup of those three. Similarly, Pinnock is a bit longer. Um, if we sort of look at which one to target over a sort of longer timescale, Pinnock has the better data in the sense that his his shot average is 0.64 over the last 30 games. However, this season, Collins has been the one having shots more sort of consistently, and more than that, he's actually been having quite high quality chances. If we look onto his shot map, he's had so 3 shots from a corner, one from a set piece, 2 headers, 2 left foot, 1 right foot. So it's a pretty nice blend of shots. So I really like that matchup. As it stands, the prices are currently is 2-1 to have a shot with Unibet over MGM. I'm not sure who the best price is after that. Pinnock is 2.5 um, with BetMGM, and SpreadX have him at 2.5 as well. Also looks good value. If we look into the shot on target prices, Bet365 have Collins at 5-1, and Pinnock is slightly bigger. So one to keep an eye on, especially if Spurs can sort of take the lead. It'll be an ideal game state for Brentford to hopefully have some shots, hopefully have some good chances, create some corner opportunities, and then that brings Collins and Pinnock into the game. There isn't a definitive angle for me in addition to that. As a lean, I've got Spurs to make 11 fouls and then Bournemouth to draw a foul, which comes out at 1.91 with Sky. However, I'd be a bit wary of that. I think with Sharda playing alongside in Burma, it sort of changes the dynamic of their forward line, and it's probably worth just seeing how they play before betting on that. I do think Mbeumo sees a lot more of the ball, but I do think Brentford sort of struggle with progression. If we think about how Sharda plays from a subjective point of view, he is a player who likes to dribble as opposed to combine, whereas Wisser and Mbeumo sort of combine really well. I don't think he has that connection yet with Sharda. So in that sense, I think Brentford could struggle, and I think Spurs dominate this game. Can't really see anything other than that. But I do think Brentford will find their chances. Spurs have obviously not been a watertight defence under Ange Postecoglou, which Brentford can certainly exploit. Next game, moving away from the 3 o'clock kickoffs, we are going to Selhurst Park at 5:30, where it is Crystal Palace against Man United. It's been a winless start for Crystal Palace, not an ideal start to the campaign under Glasner, as they have currently a record of 2 wins and 2 draws. Um, Most recently, they salvaged a draw against Leicester, which is obviously not ideal at home. They were 2-0 down, and then a Mateta brace got them back into contention. Um, it was a late penalty in the end that got Palace the point, but it wasn't a convincing display at all from them. One thing they might take confidence from is the fact that they beat Man United 4-0 in this fixture last season, towards the end of the season. So they might just sort of look to use that, find a bit of confidence from that, and hopefully look to kick off and find some momentum. It's also been an inconsistent start for Man United, but they were extremely convincing in their last game against Southampton, has to be said. I think, excluding the first 30 minutes, they played that game perfectly. Obviously, they probably should have gone 1-0 down. Archer missed the penalty, but they were completely dominant in the second half, and I think they deserve a lot of credit for that. In the end, they only conceded 6 shots, almost from the penalty spot, so I think it's easy to be harsh when you judge them, but they have improved this season. They do look a bit more confident, and new signings have definitely had an impact, in addition to the return of players from injury like Lissandro Martinez. There's no new injuries for Ten Hag to contend with. Bruno is still listed on the injury report, but doubt he misses out. For Glasner, also no new injury concerns. It is worth noting, though, that we could expect some changes given how poor or flat Palace looked in their last game against Leicester. Saar looks sharp off the bench, and I would like to see him start, but I do think he sits on the bench again. Nketiah, I think, will be having another start. He looked really sharp against Leicester. He had 6 shots in total, and he also got his first goal against QPR in the EFL Cup most recently. So he should be full of confidence, and he is actually my angle one. It's for him to have 2 shots with one on target, which comes out 1.95 with Bet365. So as I said, he's in good form. He's only played 2 games for Palace so far, so it's a small sample to go off. But he's looked quite good in that time, and he's been impressive. From a tactical standpoint, backing the sort of inside forwards for Palace is always a target, and it's because you've got Munoz who basically plays as a winger. He's listed as a wing back, but he bombs forward. He gets forward so often. And he's very involved in the attacks. He holds width, and Mateta sort of pins the opposition centre backs back. And in doing that, it creates a lot of space for the inside forwards, Eze, and in this case, it will be Nketiah. As we saw last game against Leicester, Nketiah sort of has that selfishness that Eze doesn't. He sort of has that striker's instinct that makes him a better target for shots, in my opinion. Obviously, he didn't get much of a chance at Arsenal in terms of starting, so it's difficult to read too much into his data there. But it's sort of undeniable that he's a very good goal scorer, and when given the sort of minutes, I think he will really prove himself, especially emulating that sort of role Elise played last season. He gets a lot of freedom. He can break into the box. He can sort of play around the edge of the box, linking with Eze. And I think this is really a really nice price, and it should be closer to Eze's price. So Eze is, I believe, odds against to register 4 shots, whereas Nketiah is 1.5 to register 2 shots. So quite a big discrepancy there, despite both of these two players expected to play in a very similar role. So that's my angle one. I think there's a few ways to sort of navigate it. Have to be wary that it's obviously just his third game for the club. Very small sample size to go off. So I'd be wary of sort of staking too high on him. Um, Angle two for me is for Palace to register at least 2 offsides, which is priced at 2.0 with Bet365. For this one, the data looks fantastic for Palace, but it's worth noting that Man United aren't a great matchup. They've only conceded 2 offsides in 3 out of 6 games, but I'm going to lead with the Palace data here, which I think is pretty hard to ignore. Um, so the table from player stats here is filtered to when Glasner took over. So his first game was against Burnley, and in that time we can see that averaging 3.11 offsides per game in all competitions, which is obviously very high, much higher than the league average. 2 or more offsides has landed in 14 out of 19, and 8 out of 10 at Selhurst Park. Last time Man United played against Palace, there was 2 offsides for Crystal Palace, so that obviously bodes well. This is also priced at 1.57 with Sky. It's sort of it's normal that Sky is shorter than 365 in this kind of market because they don't offer two-way. But to see such a big discrepancy is quite rare. I would say a fair price is closer to sort of 1.7, 1.8. So 2.0 for 2 offsides looks a really good price, and I'll happily take that. I do think there's ladder potential. 3 or more offsides has landed 6 out of 10 at Selhurst Park uh, for Palace. And I think there's a number of different players that can be caught. I think Mateta will always try to pin his opposition centre back. We obviously see Munoz and Tarek Mitchell playing very high up. But there's also potential for the inside forward. I think Nketiah will look to get in behind. Same for Eze. So there's loads of players that can be caught. I just hope that an advantage isn't played because that's usually what sort of lets us down with these kind of angles. But that's angle two, ladder potential with the offsides. Angle three is for there to be over 37.5 tackles in the match. And this comes from Man United actually ranking with the most tackles in the league so far, and Palace rank third. So it's two teams that are willing to tackle. They obviously press high and aggressive, especially with Palace playing at home. I think they'll look to be aggressive against Man United, and that should lead to sort of high tackle count. So over 37.5 tackles is currently priced at 1.4 with Bet365, obviously on the shorter side. But the reason I'm going for the shorter line here is because it's landed in 3 out of 4 games for Palace, with the one miss being against Chelsea where there was 32 tackles, and it's landed in 3 out of 4 games for Man United, with the only miss being 36 tackles against Brentford. So as you can see, they're going very close in every time. Most of the time, they're going about 40 and over. So I really like that selection, especially when you consider that Man United have drawn the force mode tackles. So they've drawn a lot of tackles, they're making a lot of tackles in their new high pressing sort of system under Ten Hag. So I think tackles is one to target here. Obviously, 1.4 is too short. What can we pair that with? Another tactical switch we've seen is United look a lot more composed on the ball. So especially in their last game against Southampton, when they took the lead, one might logically expect Southampton to sort of dominate play, see a lot more of the ball, have a lot more shots. However, it was the complete opposite. Once Man United took the lead, they pretty much killed the game entirely. They were a lot more composed on the ball, were good at keeping it, and they've really limited any chances for Southampton, barring the sort of 30-minute spell at the start of the game. I think it's undeniable how much Man United have improved this season defensively. The numbers sort of speak for themselves. Uh, Man United are yet to concede over 15.5 shots this season. And that's largely due to the sort of introduction of Lisandro Martinez back into the team after sort of having a long spell out last season, and his partnership with De Ligt and the introduction of Manuel Ugarte in midfield. I think those sort of that sort of defensive trio has really helped them, or will really help them going forward. It sort of makes them stronger in duels, able to defend central space a lot better, and therefore limit opposition shots. What you can do is, as I said, Man United yet to concede more than 15 shots. So combining the overmatched tackles with Palace have under 15.5 shots comes out at exactly even money with 365, which I think is again a really nice price, short on the touch. But yeah, 1.95 I think is a really nice price. Um, and with ladder potential. I think Man United come into this game as quite heavy favourites. Obviously, the market doesn't favour them as much as I do, but it's worth noting that in in the case of Man United lead, I don't think that affects Palace shots too much. As we saw against Southampton, when Man United did take the lead, they were more focused on killing the game, keeping the ball, as opposed to sort of sitting back and inviting pressure. So in the opposite case, in which Palace take the lead, obviously I think they will be more willing to sit back and defend what they have already. So I think I really like targeting the unders here. I think the line is too high. It's sort of unjustifiable. If this was last season, maybe that's a fair line, but I wouldn't say this season. So happy to take the under and combine that with match tackles to get us to an even money price. So that's our bets for this game. We've got 4 in total, including the double at the end. And moving on, next game is Brighton against Forest, which is a 2 p.m. kickoff on Sunday at the Amex. It's been a really positive start for Fabian Herzler. I think there was a lot of sort of doubt surrounding him when he took his role. No tag Mitchell shots. I'm worrying about playing it. Yeah. So, oh yeah, probably should mention this actually. Um, Tag Mitchell's data for shots under Glasner, especially at home, is very positive, very good on the surface. But I think the last 2 games I've watched him, I think he's had a shot both times I've watched him, but I haven't been that impressed with the sort of positions he picks up and just just generally, I haven't really been impressed with him. I think he's more one to sort of keep width, and his shots will come at the end of the game when Palace are losing or chasing the game. I just don't think it's a sustainable uh, price to back. I think the data is a bit misleading in this um, for him. So I'm going to avoid it. 2.37 is obviously a decent price. It stayed about the same the whole season, but I would just be wary. I think the data is misleading. Eye test sort of leads me to believe he's not really taking up the position to justify such a high amount of shots. Um, so yeah, I'm gonna give it a rest this week, especially because I think Man United is a tough match at 4 shots. I'm gonna not play it this week. Against Leicester, I mentioned how Leicester were a pretty ideal match at 4 shots, given how they tend to sit back. But in doing so, Tyrick Mitchell basically played really, really wide the entire game. I think his shot was completely random. So it's one to watch out for. I wouldn't be, it's not an instant play. The data obviously looks good, but that doesn't tell the whole story. Moving on to Brighton against Forest. Yep, as I say, it's been a good start for Hertzler. 2 wins, 2 draws, undefeated. Most recently drew against Ipswich, which is obviously not an ideal result for them, but they were very unlucky to score in the end. I think they created enough chances, but it was Muric who just had a fantastic game. Um, Nottingham Forest are on the exact same record, 2 wins, 2 draws. Very, very good start for them. And these two sides are only separated on goal difference. So should be a good game on paper. It's two teams that are flying. And I'm actually quite interested in this game for a few reasons actually. Mostly to do with fouls. So the big talking point on the side of Brentford, or on the side of Brighton, sorry, is the absence of João Pedro, who's missed both games since returning from international duty. Not too sure about him actually. Hasn't been too much information released. I would say it's probably a 50-50 whether he starts or not. Nottingham Forest, they most recently beat Liverpool at Anfield. Obviously, a fantastic result. We saw a bit of a unexpected lineup from Nuno Santo, but I think we see a sort of more conventional lineup against Brighton, in which Hudson-Odoi and Elanga return to the starting 11. Ward-Prowse played the full 90 on his full debut, which is also something to note. And he's actually my first angle, which is him to make at least one foul with Paddy Power. So Forest have been a solid team to target for fouls so far. You can obviously see them racking up some high numbers. And Ward-Prowse, in his first game, made exactly one foul against Liverpool. That was in a very deep block for Forest, and they only made 6 fouls in total. So the fact that he contributed one is obviously a pretty good sign on the surface. Um, but I like this for a few other reasons. I don't think Ward-Prowse is an ideal person to target for fouls. He's not a particularly aggressive player. He presses quite strongly, but he's not one to make like a cynical foul or something like that. Um, I really like the fact that Paddy Power offers super sub for this because I do think he starts. I do think he plays close to full 90, but not the full 90. And in this game, the sort of main focus for this price is the opposition matchup. So if we look into Brighton, if we look into the opposition midfielders playing against Brighton, last game in the EFL Cup, we had João Gomez and Tommy Doyle both make 2 fouls. Prior to that, we had Morsey and Calvin Phillips also struggle in midfield, with Morsey making 3 fouls and Phillips making 2 fouls, both of them being booked. Obviously, those are two sort of very aggressive players, so naturally they will rack up fouls. But against Arsenal, we had Thomas Partey and Rice both make 2 fouls each against Brighton. So midfielders are sort of struggling against Brighton. I think the sort of fluid system that they play under Hurtsler makes it hard, particularly for the opposition midfielders. So keep tabs on who they're marking, sort of what space to occupy, and I think that sort of explains the foul count so far in midfield. With Forest, they have a lot of midfielders. They have a lot of capable midfielders, um, who are very good for targeting fouls. So, excluding Ward-Prowse, we have Ryan Yates, we have Sangare, we have Elliot Anderson, Dominguez. All four of those very, very good for fouls. So when we have um, a matchup like Brighton, which is obviously good for targeting midfielders to make a foul, and we have the super sub rule on Paddy Power, which ensures us in the event of Ward-Prowse saying, let's say he plays 60 minutes or 70 minutes. If he does, that could actually be ideal if he hasn't already made a foul, because we get a player with much better data for fouls. So really, really like that. I would say if you don't have a Paddy Power account, probably best to avoid this. Ward-Prowse is 1.6 with 365, 1.36 with Sky to make a foul, which is not really ideal prices. So yeah, I think if you have a Paddy Power account, take it. If not, be very wary. Next up, targeting another good matchup, which is for Hudson-Odoi to make a foul and Veltman to be fouled. So Hudson-Odoi's data is nothing to scream about at all. He's made just one foul in 4 games so far this season. But the focus here is on his matchup against Veltman. Veltman is obviously, if you don't watch him, he's a player who goes on very, very easily. He incites contact, he buys fouls, and because of that, he sort of draws his opposition winger into a lot of fouls. So as you can see this season, he's already drawn 14 fouls in just 4 games. And expecting Hudson-Odoi to start, I think we just have to target that matchup. If we look into the sort of pricing, um, Hudson-Odoi is 1.8 to make a foul with Bet365, but an alternative angle that I'll present again, which looks to take advantage of the super sub rule with Paddy Power, is if you go Hudson-Odoi to make a foul and Veltman to be fouled, that comes out at 1.89, which is much better odds, and we get insured by super sub. So obviously Hudson-Odoi didn't start last game, which suggests that if he does start this game, he won't play the full 90. He might share that with Elliot Anderson. And if we look into Elliot Anderson's foul data, it's much, much better than that of Hudson-Odoi. Um, you can see here, he made 3 fouls in his first start against Southampton, 1 foul against Newcastle, 1 foul against Wolves, and then no fouls in a 61-minute appearance against Liverpool. So if we sort of get Hudson-Odoi for 60 minutes, Anderson for 30 minutes against Veltman, I think it's a perfect, perfect matchup given that insurance. Again, I'd be wary of backing this with 365 without any cover. You'd rather have the sort of Paddy Power insurance here, but I do think 1.8 is a good price for a foul, considering how good the matchup is. Just make sure that both players start in the ideal position before sort of playing it fully. But that will be my second bet for this game. Third bet and final bet for this game is for Carlos Baleba to make 2 or more fouls, which comes out at 2.0 with Paddy Power again. It's also priced at 1.83 with Sky, so if you don't have a Paddy Power account, good enough to take with Sky, I would say. It's 1.57 with 365, which is way too short here, and I wouldn't suggest taking that. But Baleba's always a target for fouls. I think he's a he's a very aggressive player, and he can tend to be a bit clumsy at times. Um, so far this season, he's made two more fouls in 2 out of 4. He's only made 1 foul in each of his last 2 games. But if we sort of extend the sample size to last season, or if we go to sort of 50-game sample size, we can see that his fouls per game average is well over 2. And that makes this price look really good if we can expect him to sort of play the 90 uh, in a good matchup here against Forest, who he should be up against the likes of Ryan Yates, Gibbs White. It's a good matchup to target fouls. I'm not going to do too much sort of lineup prediction around Forest just because Nuno has a lot of midfielders at his disposal, so it's sort of it's not 100% sure how they line up. But if we look into Baleba, 2.36 fouls per 90 over the last 30 games, 1 foul against Wolves in a 60-minute appearance, 1 foul against Ipswich, but then 2 fouls against Arsenal and 2 fouls against Crawley Town, 3 fouls against Crawley Town in the cup. Notably, he's played the 90 in both of the last 2 league games, so it's a reasonable assumption he plays the 90 again here, especially given that he was substituted early against Wolves. Um, yeah, and again, looking into last season, we can see he sort of finished the season racking up the fouls. 4 fouls against Man United at home, 2 fouls against City, 3 fouls against Burnley, 4 fouls against Arsenal, two against Brentford. So he certainly has the potential to rack up the fouls here. And I think there's good value in it being even money, especially if he is to play the 90. Obviously, with this one, we won't get the super sub rule, but I think it's good enough to take as a single with it if it is to stay at odds against or at 2.0. Right, that's 4 games covered. The next one is the big game, Man City against Arsenal. I think on the surface, it looks a pretty tough game to predict. However, I've got quite a lot of angles to go through. So without wasting any time, this is the biggest game of the weekend, final game of the weekend. Uh, first against second, first against second of last season, first against second of this season. So we've got massive implications on the title race come the end of the season. It's not set up to be the most entertaining fixture, but I still think there's a lot of potential angles. De Bruyne was taken off in the last game against in the Champions League, so he comes in as a doubt for this game. I think if he is to start, it's obviously beneficial for Haaland. If not, we'll see Foden return to the lineup, which is not good for Haaland. Um, for Arsenal, we'll obviously Declan Rice return. Odegaard remains out, so we could once again see sort of Havertz drop into a deeper midfield role. I don't think that's an optimal solution for Arteta. I didn't like how they set up against Atalanta. I just think sort of Havertz is probably the most informed player in that team, so you don't really want to be changing him. You'd rather be sort of building around him rather than the other way around. Um, with that being said, Arsenal were fantastic against Man City last season. They kept 2 clean sheets. Uh, Haaland, I don't think had a shot on target in either of those games, so they should come into this full of confidence. And I don't think Arteta changes much from that blueprint. With that in mind, it sort of renders season data a bit irrelevant. You don't really get a game like this very often in the season. So for this, for the analysis in this game, I'm going to focus more on the sort of head-to-head games last season, what we learned from them, and how we can sort of extrapolate from that to bet on this game. So with that in mind, the first bet is for there to be under 1.5 goals in the first half and under 1.5 cards in the first half. So if we look into the Etihad game last season, there were 0 goals in the first half and 0 cards in the first half. So obviously this bet would have landed very easily. However, at the Emirates, there were 3 cards in the first half. And I think one of the reasons for that was Arsenal started off a bit chaotic, a bit hectic, looking to sort of take advantage of sort of City not settling in straight away into an away game. And in doing so, the game was quite open to start off with, at least before sort of settling down around the half an hour mark. At the Etihad, I don't think that happens. I think Arsenal look to sort of stay compact, stay very tight right from the start, as opposed to sort of take advantage of the chaos, take advantage of the crowd, which they obviously won't have on their side this time. And that explains why there was basically nothing that happened last season in the first half. You can combine the two uh, for a price of 2.45 with Bet365, which obviously anything over 2.0 looks a nice price here. But if you want to go a bit more risk taking, you can do under 0.5 goals, under 0.5 cards, which comes out just short of 10 to 1. So considering that landed last season, I think that's a pretty solid angle for a long shot, especially given that you don't need to stake too high. It's priced very high. So that's something to take a note of. At the Etihad last season, there were just 8 shots in the first half. Um, and the referee here is Michael Oliver. So I think we get a more lenient ref, good for sort of back in the unders. So I like that as a first angle. Obviously, this didn't land at the Emirates. So if you were looking for a sort of alternative angle in regards to goals, what you could do is no first half goal, which is priced at 2.62, under 2.5 goals, which is 1.8 with 365, or both teams to score no, which is also 1.8. I think there's loads of different angles you can sort of approach that, but I think the sort of bottom line is it shouldn't be an entertaining game. It shouldn't be end to end. It'll be quite passive, quite cagey, quite tightly contested, and that sort of lends itself to backing the unders here. On a similar line of thought, there was 16 shots at the Emirates and 18 shots at the Etihad in total. And the current match shot line is set at 23.5. So I think again there's potential to sort of back the unders. It's shortened a bit, but both sides favour sort of creation of high quality chances as opposed to volume. So they won't be taking long shots because that sort of forces turnovers. They'd rather keep the ball, dominate possession, sustain pressure, and focus on creating high quality chances. And because of that, we saw very few shots in both games between these two last season. I think that's a trend that will persist. I don't see why it shouldn't. If Arsenal sort of sit back and defend deep, they naturally don't afford many shots. But I don't think they'll be particularly enterprising on the break either. If we saw them against Atlanta in the Champions League, I thought they were really poor going forward, and I think they had only 6 shots in total. So they're not really one to target for shots, especially in this matchup against a pretty solid City defense. I think they'll be happy with the draw. They'll be glad if they finish this game 0-0. So again, I think shots really like the under here based on all those points. Next bet is a bit more of a rogue one, and it's for Gabriel to register under 0.5 fouls, which is priced at 2.62 with Bet365. Obviously, 365 are the only bookmaker that offer two-way markets on uh this sort of market. So if you don't have a 365 account, probably just ignore this section. But this season we've seen a tactical shift from Arsenal, and it's been that Saliba and Gabriel have sort of switched roles. What I mean by that is last season we saw sort of Gabriel as the primary aggressor in that pairing, with him more willing to sort of contest duels, get tight to his opposition defender, which led Saliba to play more as a sweeper and sort of mop up in essence. They've switched that this season. We've seen Saliba actually be the more aggressive player, while Gabriel has played the Saliba role of last season. And because of that, that's sort of reflected in their dual stats. So Saliba's made 2 tackles in every game so far this season, in addition to 7 fouls in 5 games, whereas Gabriel has just 4 fouls in 5 games and just 4 tackles as well. So you've seen a massive decrease in overall duels, tackles, and fouls, which is one to keep an eye on. With this game last season, we saw Gabriel make 3 fouls at the Etihad, but as I say, roles have reversed here. Saliba made 0 fouls in both games against Man City. Um, so I think Gabriel's a decent shout here for the under. I would ideally like to back under tackles, but as I say, Bet365 are the only one that offer this, and they're only offering under 1.5 tackles at 1.5, which is obviously too short to play as a single. So I like the under fouls. I think in general, Haaland sees very little of the ball, which will put him in very few duels with Saliba and Gabriel, and I think in most cases it will be Saliba. In addition, if we see Arsenal sort of sitting back in a nasty low block, Gabriel will spend most of the time in his own box, sort of around his own 6 yard box, around the edge of the box, which is not a good position to make fouls. Because obviously, if he makes a foul, it's a penalty. So I like that. I think from a tactical perspective, I don't think he sees too many duels. I think his most of his involvement will be sort of blocking shots, clearing crosses, things like that, rather than getting tight to Haaland and being aggressive. The only thing that sort of worries me is from set pieces when he gets forward. Obviously, Arsenal play very aggressive there. I just think I just think this price at 2.62 really stands out. Next one for me, angle 4, is going with Rodri, who is back from injury. He started in the last game for Man City in the Champions League, and I think he's just a player that It's sort of the narrative is set up for him to have a good game here. He had two shots at the Emirates last time he faced Arsenal. He didn't play the game at the Emirates because he was suspended. Um, but expecting Arsenal to sit deep, I think whenever Rodri faces a low block, he's always a target for shots. And it's because first of all, he fancies himself from distance. And whenever teams sit deep, sort of naturally opens up the space around the edge of the box for him. It's in a sort of the space arises in the zone in which he occupies, and if he likes to shoot from distance, naturally it's a good matchup to target shots. He's also a threat from set pieces, um, and I think that will be the sort of prominent talking point from this game. I think it will be sort of both teams feeling each other out, accumulating a lot of set pieces, and sort of relying on those situations to create goal scoring opportunities. Rodri is obviously going to be one of the targets for Man City, in addition to sort of Ruben Diaz and Guardiola. He'll be up there, so there's a chance we sort of get a shot from that kind of situation, from a corner, from a cross, that sort of thing. Um, he played the full 90 in the Champions League recently, so I think he's sort of back to full fitness and should be in order for another 90-minute performance here. He's just he's just one of those players who he sort of turns up in these kind of big games. You know, he scored in the Champions League final. He obviously scored the winning goal or the goal for Man City last season against West Ham to secure the league title. He's just sort of the man for the big occasion. I think, especially at home, getting odds against here again for two shots is a really nice price and one to take advantage of. Finally, um, we are targeting Bernardo Silva for a few reasons. Last season, we obviously targeted him a lot in bigger games like this, where he'll have a bit more defensive responsibility, um, and where it's sort of more more emotional in a sense. It's obviously a big game. It will have big implications on the title race come the end of the season, most likely. Um, so I think he'll be really up for it. Should be in for a full 90 or thereabouts, and he also should be playing in a central role. So most predictive lineups have him sort of in front of Rodri alongside Foden. Uh, and I think playing in that sort of position, big opportunity to target Jules. If we look into his data from last season, at the Etihad, he made one foul, three tackles, and was dribbled past three times. Dribbled past essentially meaning he attempted three tackles and did not win the ball. So three out of six tackles, one foul, playing on the right wing, which is important to note. Um, at the Emirates, he made one foul, three tackles, two dribbled past, and received a yellow card in a central midfield role. So we could see him sort of return to that position here. Now, I'm pretty sure this price will drop, so I'm not gonna sort of post about it instantly, but he's currently 1.83 for two tackles with Sky and 3.5 for three tackles. Now, considering last season he made three tackles in both games, and that was from a pretty low percentage of sort of efficiency, three tackles looks a really good shout here. Should be in for the full 90, playing in a central role, and the data looks great. So 3.5 for three tackles is a nice shout. In addition, he's 1.53 for a foul with Bet365. Again, nice if you want to sort of double that with something, potentially like a Rodri shot. And he's 5.5 with Sky for a card. As I say, I think Sky will shorten both of those selections. I think they're sort of out of line with the general industry. Very big considering the data. And I would hope they don't shorten, but yeah, I'll be posting about them tomorrow. I'm almost certain to take those given the data. So that will be it for me. We've covered quite a lot of games, covered quite a lot of angles. I will be finalizing the sort of bets and staking plan and posting them over the course of today and tomorrow. So make sure you're sort of following me on Twitter, join the Telegram for my advice taking plans. Again, thank you for your questions. Thank you for your support. Really appreciate it a lot. Again, it's a second stream, so expect more changes. I think it ran a bit smoother than last week. Um, But yeah, thank you very much for taking the time to watch. Um, so I will see you in the next video. So thank you very much and take care. See you later.